When breaking bad news to a family, it's very important that you consider a number of things. I think personally you need to think about your own emotions and make sure that you're able to contain those, because it is going to be a very difficult situation. You need to think about the environment. Is it somewhere that is quiet, where you won't be disturbed? And it's good practice to think about what you're going to say and how you're going to convey this information.
The good thing about looking after somebody at the end of their life when the death is expected is that the teams have had time to prepare. So there'll often be something like an advance directive in place, and the patients' and families' wishes will have been taken into consideration.
First of all, preparing your environment. So perhaps if you've got relatives coming onto the ward, to make sure that you're in a room with no distractions, so some privacy.
Every death is so individual, so you never know what you're going to get when you walk through that door, whether it be on a hospital or be it in a home. You really don't know, and you have to be prepared. And that's why we try to ensure our nurses they attend the end-of-life courses, because that's one of the things they're really taught about. It's not just emergencies, it's what's going to happen and how to have those discussions with those relatives and the patient.
As my role as a professional development nurse, I do work with a lot of district nurses. So some of them can be quite junior and inexperienced. And what I try to do is demonstrate to them there are good ways and bad ways of breaking bad news.
I usually find the best thing to do is to tell the person that you've got some really sad news to tell them, or some very bad news, that an accident has happened to their relative or an incident has occurred, so that they're almost prepared for the bad news that you're going to give to them. So I might start by saying something like, can you come into the office? I need to speak to you about something. So there would be a sense of urgency about that if they're coming onto the ward and something has occurred. And then I'd tell them that I've got some really sad news for you, or there's been an incident, something has happened. And then I would tell them what's happened without too much beating around the bush.
It's a very difficult thing to do. I think it's something that we all have to learn to do, especially as clinicians. We never quite know what people are aware of when they come out with a terminal diagnosis. So we have to then be careful in giving them the information that is correct. So initially, if I met a patient for the first time, I would go in there and I would ask the question, what do you know? What have you been told? And also to the family, what have you been told?
They're not always going to react to you in a way that you assume. Some people can be very angry, and that's something you just have to contain and understand.
Trying to make sure that the information that we're sharing and we're explaining the situation and really clearly providing information in the right level, in the right way that somebody can digest at that time.
We recently had a case on one of our wards where a patient, unfortunately, was found unresponsive. The feedback we got from the family was that no one conveyed the sense of urgency. So the patient had probably been unresponsive for an amount of time, and cardiopulmonary resuscitation was started on the patient. What the family were told was that he was unwell and was on his way to the hospital. So they did not get to the hospital. They didn't see that there was a sense of urgency, so they did not get to the hospital on time. And on hindsight, they were saying if they knew that that's how serious it was, they would have gone immediately to the hospital, and they felt that they would have been able to spend some precious time with their relatives.
The patient came in, had an MI. His relatives rung up and said, can we pop in to see them? And this was quite some time ago. And he went, well, actually, no, he's resting at the moment. He's having a sleep. I'll give you a call when he's woken up. And then come up to see him. That patient had a cardiac arrest, really, within about 10 minutes of me putting the phone down. I I felt dreadful because the patient died. I felt so bad that I hadn't got those relatives in to come and see that patient.
We asked the relative if they could get to the ward quickly, and they said yes. So sometimes you need to deliver bad news in the best way possible. This particular instance, it was the spouse, and I knew that he lived on his own. So rather than deliver that news by telephone, over the telephone, because it was quite unexpected, I asked him to come into the ward, and he did so. He was able to get there quickly.
At the heart of this is the patient, at the heart of this is the family, and they will remember how this information is conveyed to them for the rest of their lives. And we have a duty and a responsibility to be as compassionate and sensitive as possible, but at the same time conveying that sense of urgency so that they know that the situation is really, really urgent, and give them the opportunity to be present if they can.
You can't just break bad news and walk away. So I usually find that the best thing to do in that situation is to find out whether they've got any questions, if there's anything that I can do for them, maybe contact other relatives who would need to know this information or that could come and support them. Usually thinking about what the next steps are going to be, what we would do as a ward, as an organisation to support them.
Bereavement is difficult for everybody. As health professionals, we think that we're immune to the effects of it, but we're not. So I would say that try and do it in as professional, polite, empathetic way as you can, but also realise that you are only human.
I think the other thing that is really important is that people seek support for themselves when this happens, both at the time, but ongoing through debriefing, through reflective practice, through psychological support. And it may come back at different periods of time. It can come back on significant dates, anniversaries. It can come back around times of inquests or during investigations. And the most important thing is people seek support around this.